Washington Post, always on the forefront of innovation, so it's always exciting to chat with you. Before we dig into some kind of more technical topics, can you just kind of give me a sense of what Washington Post's strategy has been with regard to political advertising 2016?
Yeah, so you know, 2016 has been definitely difficult. Obviously, like there's, I would say, a lot of vitriol that's, you know, existed in the political scape for the past year. And so actually we've seen a lot of advertisers not necessarily want to align necessarily with that content, but that's okay because we have a lot of other great content that we work on. And so we've actually now started to see an uptick, you know, especially after the primaries were finished and the candidates were identified. And then now we're starting to see buying strategies kind of come into play. So a lot of it, you know, we were, from a programmatic standpoint, we were kind of just like, we just now started to really dive into the political landscape from a programmatic standpoint and make that inventory available. Previously, it was just one of those things where we weren't ready to necessarily like open the floodgates, if you will, of programmatic spending. And now I think we've just done that not too long ago, and it's already, we've started to see a lot of success with that. So, yeah.
Cool. So how are you seeing the current state of political advertising dollars versus, I guess, other brands that you're working with through programmatic channels? What's the state of that?
Well, I would say that you know, we don't necessarily, we get a lot of inquiries for PMPs from agencies outside of the political spending. We haven't really gotten too much in terms of specifically political buyers. And I think that, you know, we also have a buying team at the Post, and so I know what the challenges are like from the buying side. You know, it's really difficult to manage tons of PMPs, which is great when you have like the multi-pub deal IDs that that buyers can target. But, you know, when it comes to like a publisher's stack, you know, moving up into the PMP realms or even like programmatic guaranteed, you move up the stack and you're able to actually cherry pick the audiences that you're looking for. Whereas if you're just buying on like a whitelisting strategy or just on the open marketplace, you really are kind of like the last, part of the last group to pick at the impression. And so one of those things that we are trying to educate and help buyers with is just like, yes, we know and we think that the technology is going to fix itself when it comes to PMPs, but in terms of making it easier on the buyers to manage all these deal IDs, but it actually helps them access the audiences that they're actually trying to reach.
Cool. Do you see that political buyers are pretty much in line with other brands that you work with their kind of sophistication and understanding of how to utilize data, the importance of the content that they're serving against, and the ad effectiveness therein?
I think, you know, as was mentioned earlier today, that, you know, a lot of political campaigns, like they have amazing data, right? And they're probably utilizing that. It's great when you have your own data because you don't have to like buy off third-party data, so you can actually get inventory a lot cheaper. But what we've done really hard at the Washington Post is to try to create like a unified auction, and also, you know, in the absence of a person, your reputation becomes a line in a spreadsheet, right? So we've been really focused on eliminating ad units that just aren't great, that don't perform well, because if you don't have a direct relationship with the buyer, you become like, you know, you're just a line on a spreadsheet, and they could say like, oh, you know, I get better performance on these other sites, so I'm just going to either cut or remove. And so we've worked really hard to make sure that we're not one of those sites that gets cut. We really care about, I guess, our data reputation, if you want to call it. But the thing is that, you know, for users on our site, they are both voters, they're in market to buy a house, they're in market to buy a car, they're probably going to buy something on Amazon, and each one of those different buyers is going to pay a different price for that user, and we're seeing a lot of more of the other types of brands really pick up and take those impressions because of the rates that they're paying.
Great. So you mentioned this concept of a unified auction, which, you know, no doubt header bidding has enabled the facilitation of to a large degree. Can you talk a little bit to kind of buyers in the room around how that benefits a buyer on a publisher site?
Sure. And as a buyer, I think if you do work and set up a PMP, one of the first questions you should always ask the publisher is, how do you have this partner implemented? Imagine you were trying to buy something on eBay and you wanted to pay 20 bucks for it, and you had like somebody actually doing the bidding for you, and they were capped at bidding $2. That's kind of what traditional tag-based implementation will do. Header bidding actually surfaces your true bid to the ad server, which for most publishers is the decisioning machine. And so if you do have a chance, if you're working on a PMP, it is preferable that they have a similar type implementation where your bid is actually surfaced so that you have a fair shot at getting the impression that you're trying to buy.
Okay, great. So does that mean that we're no longer in a race to the bottom?
No, not at all. It's quite the opposite, actually. I would say the race, I remember a couple years ago, programmatic was still viewed as the race to the bottom, and basically header bidding has allowed, it's correcting the marketplace. And so when you are actually surfacing your true bids, to your, I think you mentioned earlier, it's interesting. We don't do any sort of flooring at the Washington Post. We try to let the market equalize itself. We don't try to floor really valuable audiences because if you put a high floor on them and a buyer sees that they can get the same audience on another site, then they're just going to move their spend. So we just try to let the marketplace find its equilibrium, and we've seen a lot of success with that, and we've seen just eCPMs go up year over year significantly.